revelation.
Hey everyone, welcome to today's live stream. It is Tuesday, April 15th. Excuse me. It's Wednesday, April 15th. Thanks for joining me today. Top stories today. Trump says China isn't sending weapons to Iran. And there's some developments in the South China Sea as well. China and the U.S. might have reached an agreement, or at least an understanding, that could avoid and avert World War III. We're also going to talk a little bit about Virginia Democratic Governor Abigail Spanberger. She's banning guns down there in Virginia. And a little bit about Swalwell. I guess he went into hiding. So we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. So without any further ado, let's read the news. All right. A little snafu there. Interesting. We're going to start out with the Wall Street Journal. Iran war, April 14th. This is obviously from yesterday, 2026. U.S. enforces blockade, sends tankers back to Iran. U.S. forces have been contacting ship crews by radio and instructing them to return to Iranian ports, according to officials. Good, that's what a blockade is. There was some suppressed news yesterday about Chinese ships, whether they were allowed to skirt the blockade. So there's a little back and forth, and we're going to get to that because there's a lot riding on that very thing, whether or not China is allowed to go where other ships aren't allowed to go. So I think some sort of agreement has been reached. And again, if you weren't sure, that in the next few weeks, Trump is going to go to China and meet with Xi Jinping. And if you haven't been following this program or you don't really know, that's what we're talking about, is the cause of the war and its overall impact on global politics, geopolitics. So don't forget to engage the channel, like, subscribe, leave a comment, share the podcast. We have 37 headlines to get through in the next hour or so. So let's keep moving. Story number 2, Zero Hedge futures unchanged, just shy of all-time high on peace hopes, solid earnings. Banks like war. War is necessarily good for the stock market, but the fears of supply disruption can be problematic, supply chains, etc. Because if you can't get your fertilizer or your oil or anything else that you're used to getting, that could set things off. But apparently things are now taking shape, much to the chagrin of people like Alex Jones or Tucker Carlson or everybody who said that this could spiral out of control. And it certainly could have, but it hasn't. Just the News has the headline, chokehold: Iran could run out of oil storage with Trump blockade wreaking havoc with its economy. And again, I thought I had some text with this. The basic deal is without ships boarding oil out of the storage tanks, they can keep pumping, but they have nowhere to put it. And as soon as that happens, there's going to be a chain reaction with the Iranian economy, which is already in tatters anyway. So I think the blockade was a good strategy. I suggested doing a blockade way early. As soon as Iran closed the Hormuz Strait, I said, why should Iran allow ships to go in and out when our allies' ships can't go in and out? So if it's closed, it should be closed to everybody, and that's exactly what happened. I think it was very wise of Trump to do this during a ceasefire, because then also he could bait the Iranians sailing warships into the Persian Gulf, which he did send 2 destroyers. There is mine clearing activity, and apparently when they're searching for the mines, there are no mines. So it seems the Iranians didn't mine the channel. Obviously, they need their ships to get in and out, so that was part of the problem there, but that's the initial reporting anyway. Washington Times, Trump says Iran war is very close to over, says Iranians want a deal. Still, he says the U.S. is not finished. This is reported from, he was on Mornings with Maria Bartiromo yesterday, and he said, he floated, and this is Trump signaling and is good at propaganda. So he says the Iran war is very close to being over. That's massaging the markets, obviously. I think he played this very well. We'll see. The key is coming up very soon. As we get more into these stories, there's some really breaking news that I'm going to get into that I led with in the open, and we're going to talk about in a minute. But let's get to some other facts first. Fox News, story number 5, U.S. destroyer interdicts 2 oil tankers trying to leave Iran during Trump's blockade. U.S. official says tankers left Shabar port on the Gulf of Oman before being contacted by the warship via radio communication. As we said previously with the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal article, that they're contacting these ships. They're not having to board. They're just saying turn around. Now, this is a Iranian port in the Gulf of Oman, which is, next to the Arabian Sea per se. It's not the Persian Gulf, which the Strait of Hormuz is the choke point for the Persian Gulf. The Gulf of Oman is on the Indian Ocean, other part of Iran. But, good for the U.S. Navy to do something while they're out there. Let's go to the story. The U.S. destroyer interdicted 2 oil tankers that were trying to leave Iran on Tuesday, a U.S. official said. The official told Reuters that the ships left Chabahar port in the Gulf of Oman before being contacted by the warships. The official added that the tankers were among 6 vessels that the U.S. commands said Tuesday obeyed orders from American forces to turn around and head back to Iranian port in the Gulf of Oman. And then they go on to say more than 10,000 U.S. sailors, Marines, and airmen, along with over a dozen warships and dozens of aircraft, are executing the mission to blockade ships entering and departing from Iranian ports. During the first 24 hours, no ships made it past the U.S. blockade, and 6 merchant vessels complied with direction from U.S. forces to turn around and enter Iranian port in the Gulf of Oman. Okay, so there's a little wordplay going on here. No ships during the first 24 hours. So, but by 10 a.m. yesterday, Chinese ships were allowed to pass. And they're playing semantic games here with trying to play footsie with the Chinese. Trump is a master negotiator, so I'm not going to say that this was a wrong move. You want to try to avert making this a world war. Now, if he could come to an agreement with the Chinese, we'll let Iran pump oil and give it to you, but you can't ship weapons. And we're going to get to that in just a second. NBC News, story number 6, U.S. military turns back ships amid hopes for new peace talks. In-person talks between the U.S. and Iran could resume as early as this week, supposedly tomorrow. 2 people familiar with ongoing negotiations told NBC News. And then CNBC, Trump Hormuz blockade puts China, India in the crosshairs. Indeed, it does. Pressure on Iran spills over. And This is some rightful concern. However, let's not get our panties in a bunch just yet. Washington's maximum pressure campaign on Iran risks destabilizing the fragile détente with Beijing. Détente schmeshant. What détente? What do you mean? We're not at war. Is a Cold War with, China? The communists are at war with us, certainly. Are we at war with them? We could be. They're take a belligerent footing towards us, and so we should respond in kind as we're doing right now under Trump. India is increasingly finding that the U.S. policy is working against its own economic interests, and a miscalculation at sea could quickly turn diplomatic posturing into a crisis, and that's what we're talking about here, is handling the Chinese ships going in to get oil. Do we let them get oil? I don't know. What do you think? You think we should let them get oil? U.S. blockade of the Strait of Hormuz is not only squeezing Iran, but also ratcheting up the pressure on two of its most consequential relationships in Asia, India and China. Roughly 98% of Iranian oil exports bound for China. Weeks away, a summit with Xi Jinping. The administration has carefully cultivated a relationship or a détente with Beijing, and CNBC says we're destabilizing it. This is all about China, if you didn't know. This is the way you're playing chess. You're not playing against the knight or the bishop. You're playing against the opposing side, which is the communist. And there are corporate backers, yada, yada, yada. CNN, U.S. says blockade of Iranian ports fully implemented as Trump hints at further peace talks. Israel and Lebanon have also agreed to hold more talks after their first direct negotiation in decades. Yeah, they're letting Chinese ships go through. It's not being reported, and there is some evidence that these are, you don't want to say shadow fleets. It's a little different. They're ghost ships that are sort of skirting around. Their transponders are off. So nobody is really sure how many Chinese ships have gone through and whether or not, I would believe, or I would certainly hope, that the U.S. blockade would only let oil tankers through. And we have our satellites watching whether or not they're offloading weapon components or just taking on oil. Oh, here it is. Ship spoofing, New York Times. Article number 9, ship spoofing in Strait of Hormuz may compound confusion. A new pattern of deceptive activity by some vessels around the critical waterway suggests the new American blockade is changing how some ships linked to Iran are behaving. And the New York Times doesn't want to say Chinese ships. That's what we're talking about here. Chinese ships. Maritime intelligence experts say that more ships in and around the Strait of Hormuz seem to be adopting tactics to avoid detection since the U.S. blockade on vessels coming in and out of the Iranian ports went into effect on Monday. Now, we are starting to see vessels going darker using zombie or random identification. In the weeks after the American-Israeli attack on Iran in late February, Iranian exports were uninterrupted and had almost no need to go off radar. But in the past 24 hours, more ships appear to be manipulating the global system intended to keep tabs on vessel activity and traffic, suggesting that some vessels linked to Iran are being a bit more cautious. China. This is a cat and mouse game involving the biggest supplier of weapons to Iran, China, and the eyes in the sky, so to speak, watching carefully what China will do next. Now, apparently, there's been some talks with Xi Jinping and President Trump, but the problem with the Chinese communists is, like Iran, they lie all the time, so can they be trusted? But better news from the Financial Times, Wall Street banks break records as Iran war drives trading boom. JC Morgan Chase, Citigroup, and Wells Fargo reported more than $25 billion of profits for their first quarter. Iran war, the Iran war obviously is helping banks, and it always has, since the Rothschilds figured out how to do it back in the 18th century. This is the breaking headline, though. Trump says China will not send weapons to Iran, permanently opening the Strait of Hormuz. This is story number 11. He said, President Xi will give me a big fat hug when I get there in a few weeks. We're working together smartly and very well. Doesn't that beat fighting? So it looks like Trump single-handedly averted World War III. He's a smooth operator for sure. And like I said, I'm not a fanatic about Trump. I care about policy and how you implement policy and how smartly you do that. Going back to the news, though, story number 12, Washington Examiner, Trump Hormuz blockade unlikely to draw China into war. Isn't that great? From the Washington Examiner, President Donald Trump's latest move in the Iran war, a partial blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, is unlikely to force China into deeper engagement in the conflict, but does risk raising tensions with Beijing if the war drags on beyond the White House's timeline. To date, China has not taken a significant public steps to aid either Iran, its close ally, or the United States in the conflict. What the fuck are they talking about? Well, some observers predicted the blockade would push Beijing to pursue a diplomatic resolution more aggressively, particularly given its reliance on Iranian oil. Multiple China policy experts and former Trump administration officials told the Washington Examiner the expectation is misplaced. China, they argue, is structurally positioned to sit this one out. Of course, we said that in the beginning, and Trump knew this. With months of petroleum reserves, diversified energy sources, and access to discounted Russian oil, Beijing can absorb the short-term disruption without rushing to intervene. They want Iranian oil, but they don't need Iranian oil, is what they're saying. Not to mention this, but all military experts have been saying that China isn't quite ready to take on the United States. And that's why the fear-mongering around Taiwan is not appropriate yet. They are running military drills. There is some action in the South China Sea. And there is still some concern still that the communists are aiding China because, well, they're communists and they lie just like Iran. Reuters, Iran used Chinese spy satellite to target U.S. bases, says the Financial Times. Iran secretly acquired a spy satellite, a Chinese spy satellite, giving the Islamic Republic new capability to target U.S. military bases across the Middle East. During the recent war, the TEE-01B satellite, built and launched by a Chinese company, Earth Eye Company, was acquired by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Aerospace Force in late 2024 after it was launched into space from China. The Iranian military commanders directed the satellite to monitor major U.S. military sites. The newspaper said, citing timestamp coordinate lists, satellite imagery, and orbital analysis, the images were taken in March before and after drone and missile strikes at those locations. So everybody was saying it was the Russian satellites. Zelensky, again, we knew he was lying, but it wasn't the Russian satellites. It was a Chinese satellite, or maybe this is just a disinformation that's being floated by Reuters. But the problem is that most of the missiles that are being used in Iran by Iran are Chinese, made with Chinese parts, or they're Chinese weapons themselves. And that's the thing, is they were about to float in these YJ-12B missiles that are satellite targeted, anti-ship missiles that are satellite targeted and are hypersonic, which can avoid most countermeasures. Going on with the story, the White House, CIA, Pentagon, the Chinese Foreign Affairs Ministry, and Defense Ministry, Earth Eye Company, and Empostat did not immediately respond to requests by Reuters for a comment. As of the deal, the IRGC received access to commercial ground stations operated by Emposat, a Beijing-based provider of satellite control and data services with a network extending across Asia, Latin America, and other regions. The satellite captured images of Prince Sultan Air Force Base in Saudi Arabia on March 13th, 14th, and 15th, said the Financial Times. Is this misinformation? It's hard to say. And now the other key to the puzzle, more Reuters here. China moves to block entrance to disputed South China Sea shoal, images show. So I believe this is an agreement with Trump giving China a little more sovereignty or control over the waters around China. Temporarily, maybe while this thing in Iran is going on. I'm sure they worked out a deal. Trump's always about a deal. It doesn't really matter. It matters that this doesn't go turn into a world war. China needs this to be done just as much as anybody else. That's the issue. Any prolong, it just doesn't affect American markets, Western markets, European markets. China could sit it out, sure, as we just noted, but America could sit it out too as far as needing imports from there. The fertilizer is more important than the oil at this juncture. So the best thing to do is wrap this up, and Iran has to agree not to have a nuclear weapon, and hopefully that's all going to come to terms. Now that we reach an agreement with China, because that's the sticking point. Why? And as I've been saying for weeks and months now, New York Times, article number 15, how China's weapons transfers to Iran have evolved over the decades. China has denied claims this month by U.S. intelligence that it might have shipped arms to Iran. It did. Of course, they're going to lie about it, but it did. In recent years, well, the thing is, and this is the point, it's not fully assembled arms. It's the component for the YJ-12B missiles. So, but the problem is they have nowhere to put them together now. For much of the past 2 decades, China has maintained a delicate balance in its military relationship with Iran, offering often indirect assistance instead of arms sales. The approach is now drawing renewed attention after U.S. officials said U.S. intelligence agencies were assessing whether China may have shipped shoulder-fired missiles to Iran in recent weeks. President Trump has said he would impose an additional 50% tariff on Chinese goods if the assessment proved accurate. China has denied the claim, calling it pure fabrication, and has vowed to absolutely retaliate if the Trump administration goes through with the tariffs. Chinese arms sales to Iran exploded in the 1980s and have all but vanished in the last decade to comply with the United Nations embargo and U.S. sanctions. Chinese support for Iran in recent years has instead come in the form of components that could be used both in civilian technologies as well as missile and drones. That's a joke. China has a major stake in the crisis in Iran. About a third of its total crude oil imports come from the Persian Gulf. Iran state-run defense companies were suddenly empowered to export their wares. That resulted in a deluge of Chinese missiles, fighter jets, tanks, armored vehicles, and assault rifles being sold to Iran starting in 1982 and peaking in 1987. Now, and China was selling arms to Iraq as well during the Iran-Iraq war. This is during the 80s. The Reagan administration opposed China's arms sales to Iran, particularly Silkworm anti-ship cruise missiles. Iran used the missiles in attacks in Kuwaiti waters in 1987 that struck an American-owned tanker, an American registered tanker. And that was during the 1980s, and there was in the Iran-Iraq war, and then you had the thing with the Stark, and there were all sorts of engagements going on in the Persian Gulf. The Gulf was mined, and it was a disaster for oil shipments there. But in the 1990s, technological transfers were happening. Following the war, Iran set out to develop its own military-industrial base with the help of China. It just means the factories. Both of these key products was the Nor anti-ship cruise missile, which has been reverse engineered through purchases of Chinese C-802 cruise missiles. reverse engineered. They're sold the components. How do we know they've not sold the instructions to how to build them? I mean, we don't know. China played a major role in supporting Iran's military modernization for decades, especially in developing Iran's missile capabilities. By the way, how did China get these missile capabilities? Well, Bill Clinton signed the order to allow these delicate military use, dual use rocket missile components that China used and then started exporting to our enemies. Iran also received help from China in building missile production facilities and even in constructing a missile test range east of Tehran. Then into the 2000s to the present, dual-use technologies, because there was an embargo. In 2006, the United Nations imposed sanctions on Iran's nuclear and ballistic missile programs. China voted in favor of the resolution and largely pivoted away from the new formal arms contract with Tehran, but went to dual use. China continued to supply Iran with dual use technologies and materials that helped it amass an arsenal of missiles and drones. That's the reason the war with Iran, the conflict with Iran, started when it did, is they were going from the technology that they largely have now to shipping what we call the or what China calls the YJ-12B, specifically the land-based anti-ship missiles that could fire from the heights, the cliffs of the Strait of Hormuz into any ships within the Persian Gulf. And I was even more worried about them receiving missile capability of the Chinese YJ-19s or YJ-20s, which are also supersonic and that also but have a range of up to 1,200 miles, which would make the ships that are sinking, the aircraft carriers and the battle groups that are sitting in the Arabian Sea, make them vulnerable to missile attack. And like I said, these are supersonic missiles, so countermeasures like the Aegis system won't work for that. What they were shipping were chemicals used to produce fuel for ballistic missiles and components for drones and missiles, such as radio frequency connectors and turbine blades. Critical former support, given Iran's reliance on ballistic missiles and drones to attack U.S. and Israeli forces and other countries in the region. U.S. Treasury Department has sanctioned Chinese and Hong Kong front companies, it says, were set up to source parts and ingredients for ballistic missiles and drones from Iran. Suspicions are growing that Iran is using its access to China's Beidou satellite navigation system, which we just talked about, for military purposes. Again, it's a dual use thing, but we just talked about it in that Reuters article where they were using those satellite systems for targeting. Last month, the U.S. congressional agency said Beidou may have been used to direct Iran's drone and missile strikes across the Middle East. Indeed, it did, because if you don't have targeting, missiles are pretty much useless. And then Victor Davis Hanson said in the New York Post, article number 16 here, Trump needs 4 or 5 month window between Iran war and the midterms, must press China top. He tells Podforce One, that's Miranda Devine. What he says is at least a 4 or 5 month window will be enough to get America where oil prices will go down, the stock market will steady, interest rates might even go lower. The Republicans' massive tax and spending law enacted last year will also have more time to take effect. Indeed. So he's playing it close to the wire here. So that's why he said that's another thing that drove him to attack Iran now, because it's got to be over by the end of this month, May. Also, Victor Davis Hanson contributed here to the Substack American Greatness. What did he say? Well, he talked about China. China has lost its exclusive oil concessions in Venezuela and may have forfeited a similar sweetheart deal with Iran now or in the future If the regime falls, Beijing will likely be hated by any subsequent transitional government. It may instead seek to come to some sort of arrangement with the U.S. to send its tankers through the strait if Iran does not provoke the U.S. and lose Karg Island. Indeed, the display of American air power and evolving nature of 21st century tactics and munitions will also likely give China pause regarding Taiwan. The specter of the sea, smart mines, surface and submarine drones, showers of airborne drones and missiles from Taiwan, combined with an allied fleet similarly equipped, cannot be reassuring the Chinese. China would likely face a bloodbath transporting hundreds of thousands of soldiers across a 110-mile open water and contested sea. At the acme of French power in 1804 and 5, Napoleon was still wise enough not to press his luck transporting soldiers across the 26-mile English Channel. Hitler sat atop what is now the entire European Union by the summer of 1940, but was also savvy enough not to contest the Royal Navy in the Channel. We still have a superior Navy. China is rapidly building boats to contest that. We need to be building boats to contest that. You see, it's the New World Order plans, a WEF plan. It's the elites plan to give China the reins. And there's a number of different reasons for that. We can't let it happen. We have to let freedom and democracy reign everywhere in the United States and in the world. I mean, we should be the proponent of it, certainly. And even in the state of Virginia. Story number 18, Fox News, Spanberger signs gun bills, makes a proposed gun ban even harsher. Assistant Attorney General Harmeet Dillon warned Virginia Second Amendment shall not be infringed, because that's what they're doing. Let's look at the story. Spanberger signed a series of gun control bills Tuesday, toughening a proposed assault firearms ban before sending it back to lawmakers, which drew immediate backlash from Republicans and is likely to draw a constitutional objection from the Justice Department, of course, like Harmeet Dillon said. The Democrat governor's changes to House Bill 217 and Senate Bill 749 removed the word fixed from part of the bill's definition of assault firearm, which could sharply expand the range of semi-automatic rifles and pistols swept into the ban. If there's any doubt that Governor Spanberger was coming for our firearms, this substitute removes it. House Delegates Minority Leader Terry Kilgore, Republican Scott County, told WCYB 5 in a statement, not only does it keep in place the de facto ban on some of the most common firearms in Virginia, it goes further and appears to create a ban on any firearm that can accept a magazine of more than 15 rounds. And I'm in Connecticut, that's what we have to deal with. 10-round capacity. I just have to get more magazines. Happened there. The next article up, story number 19, Spanberger won't decide fate of gun control bills until after Virginia's gerrymandering referendum, and that's part of what she's doing as part of a stall tactic. Increasingly unpopular Virginia Abigail Spanberger has deferred consideration of several extreme gun control bills until after the state's referendum on Democrats' gerrymandering scheme. The all but certain political move by the Commonwealth's leftist governor was announced Tuesday when Spanberger revealed that she had sent the bills in question back to the Democrat-run General Assembly with amendments she claimed strengthened the common sense gun safety laws. Monday night was the deadline by which Spanberger had to decide whether to request such amendments, sign or veto legislation, or allow bills to become law without her signature. Among the bills Spanberger sought changes are the HB 217 and SB 749, which seek to ban the sale and purchase of so-called assault firearms, which isn't really a gun. I don't know. The semi-automatic center-fire rifle or pistol with a fixed magazine capacity in excess of 15 rounds in Virginia. The governor's office claims Spanberger sought, after amendments, provide additional clarity to law enforcement as it relates to firearms included in the legislation, as well as protect the use of certain semi-automatic shotguns used for hunting. Again, it's the same bullshit hunting, hunting, hunting. I don't give a shit about hunting. I give a shit about self-defense. Criminals have guns. Criminals don't abide by gun laws to obtain firearms. So why can't I legally obtain a firearm to fight criminals? I want to go now to Fox News. Story number 20. Kirk Moore wrestled the gun away from a suspected shooter, Victor Hawkins, who allegedly studied the Columbine shooting beforehand. And let's see if I can't show this video here. All right, I'm going to show you this video here of the principal of the school tackling a gunman. You can see the gunman walking in at the top of the frame. Here you see the gunman walking into the school. Student. He looks in. He's got his pistol out. Goes over in the corner. Know what he does there? Cocks it maybe. Points it. Points it at somebody standing there. Points it at that kid sitting there. Then this guy comes out and tackles him. Good job, man. Good job. And he's holding him down. And here another big fat guy comes in. He drops, when the other guy comes in, he drops the weapon. Guy kicks it away. Then he picks it up. What does he do with it? Just holding it. I'm going to take it over here. Look at this. Oh, I wonder if the guy got shot. He pointed it at him, but he didn't shoot him. Strange. Yeah, I don't know what's going on with that. Funny. But the way he pointed the gun, he had it like limp, like sort of pointing down. Well, I'm glad nobody got killed because that's not what handguns. Firearms are for protection, not for assault. All right, moving on with the news. Just the news. Scott Bessent says executive order requiring banks to collect citizenship info on customers in the process. This is story number 21. This is a good idea because if you cut off illegal alien banking, then there's less incentive to stay in the country. You're going to have to keep your money under a mattress. Yeah, shouldn't have illegal aliens here. Like I said, they were talking about amnesty. You got to get the criminals out first. You got to close the border. And I really think if you're even planning on amnesty, you should have a 1 or 2 year moratorium on all immigration. And here in my state, Fox News is reporting the DOJ sues Connecticut, New Haven over sanctuary policies. They said they're in open defiance. Article number 22. The complaint has been submitted by the federal government, has untruths, and it is misleading, says New Haven Mayor Justin Elicker. Okay, if you say so. The lawsuit names Connecticut, its Governor Ned Lamont, Attorney General William Tong, I know both those guys, as well as New Haven and its Mayor Justin Elicker, and as defendants, the complaint takes issue with the state's so-called Trust Act and other state and local sanctuary policies that the DOJ argues are illegal under federal law, which they are. The DOJ claims that policies that have allowed dangerous criminals to be released into communities in the Nutmeg State, it's Constitution State. It also alleges that the Connecticut and New Haven have made intentional efforts that the lawsuit argues obstruct federal law enforcement. Of course it does. Just like in all these other leftist places. You know, Connecticut is a Democrat supermajority. So there's a vestigial Republican Party in Connecticut, but, you know, they can't get their shit together. Part of the problem was with the Republicans in Connecticut that they were anti-Trump. Because it's all old money, you know, Greenwich money, Yale University, all that shit. Post-millennial story number 23, trans long jumper A.B. Hernandez bests California girls in prestigious competition. A.B. Hernandez's result in the triple jump was nearly 1.5 feet more than the second place finisher. Again, how does this protect girls? You're allowing men, biological men, to compete against women. It's an abomination, but it's also a travesty. The jump was 20 feet 3 inches, and the triple jump, a jump of 42 feet 6 inches. The result in the triple jump was nearly 1.5 feet more. Hernandez also placed third in the high jump with 5 feet 8 inches. Fox News again. Story number 24, suspect in string of random attacks in Georgia is naturalized citizen from UK. These acts are pure evil and devastated our department, and my prayers are with the families and the victims. So a DHS employee was killed, and this guy, Aluakalukatan Anden Abel, 26, was arrested Monday after he killed 2 people and wounded another. Faces 2 counts of murder, aggravated assault, and weapons charges in connection with the attacks, which DHS said included the killing of an employee of the agency. See, I believe the United States reserves the right to revoke the citizenship of naturalized citizens. More news, post-millennial, Trump's DOJ moves to vacate January 6 seditious conspiracy convictions from members of the Proud Boys, Oath Keepers. Good. They didn't deserve that. They weren't planning anything. It wasn't an insurrection. It was all based on the myth of insurrection. It wasn't insurrection. Nobody went there with rifles to fight the federal government. It was a protest that turned into a riot. President Trump has long maintained that the charges brought forward by President Joe Biden were disproportionate. The consequences were witch hunts and lawfare. Of course they were. Fox News again, disgruntled worker invokes Luigi Mangione in $500 million warehouse inferno he filmed in anti-capitalist rage. Chamel Abdul Karim pleaded not guilty to charges tied to the $500 million Kimberly Clark facility blaze in Ontario. It's not clear if that Canada. The guy was from California. Chamel was from Highland, California, is charged with deliberately setting the April 7th inferno that destroyed a 1.2 million square foot Kimberly Clark distribution center in Ontario. Pleaded not guilty Monday to federal and state charges. Why would you plead not guilty? And he's all over the internet saying, Luigi Mangione popped that motherfucker, and that a lot of people are going to understand why I burned down this place. Fucking anarchists, man. Fuck you. Fox News, really terrorism. Fox News, story number 27, Vance Anti-Fraud Task Force suspends 447 hospices in Los Angeles over more than 600 million suspected fraud. The White House warns fraudsters they cannot hide as suspension numbers and dollar values are only going to increase. It's funny because they said, oh, the investigation's over. It wasn't over. And more stupidity from California, the Federalist. The Stop Nick Shirley Act is a pathetic joke. The actual text of the bill is about allowing people to submit a half of a ton of paperwork to a state program so the state can tell people not to be mean to you. Basically, it undermines the First Amendment for journalists. You know, a journalist can go anywhere in public or anywhere the public has access to and to ask questions, not always to photograph, but to ask questions. You could go on private property to ask questions. You can't always photograph on private property without prior permission. So you can go, like Nick Shirley did, you can go into a place of business and say, or a childcare place and go, where are the kids, et cetera, et cetera. It's called investigation. You're allowed to investigate things. Now, if they tell you we don't want you on the property, you have to leave, then you have to leave. If you don't leave, you could be arrested for criminal trespass. Story number 29, Joe Biden did something racist again. If you didn't catch this, I always wanted to turn around to one guy and say, Barack, what are you doing? Biden said as the audience laughed. Then he waved Scruggs to come up on stage and added, I feel like you should be standing on the right and I should be standing on the left. It's always perceived as a racist or bigoted joke if you refer to somebody of race that he looks like another person of that race. Like with black people, if, did you look at the guy, he was referring to a guy, he said he looked like Barack Obama. Maybe they had the same haircut, maybe. But that's kind of a faux pas. It's like you know an Asian person and you say, oh, are you related to, so-and-so? Or you look just like Xi Jinping. Federalist. Story number 30, Democrats turned on Eric Swalwell because he was in the way, not because they have morals. Democrats aren't holding Swalwell accountable. They're removing an obstacle that potentially threatens their power in California, which is a supermajority state for the Democrats. And if a Republican governor, they have ranked choice voting, which means the top 2 vote getters will go in a runoff. And that was 2 Republicans of the most votes. And the only way they could do it is get rid of Swalwell, who had the 3rd most votes, and he didn't want to leave because he was winning. He was leading the Democrats. And they unleashed the honeypot. So if you don't know what a honeypot is, it's where you have a sex operative go and have sex with somebody. Later to come out and accuse the person of brutality or assault or something like that. It was obviously consensual sex, and the Democrats do that to everybody. And so they could, at any certain time, they can go to these women and go, it's time, you need to come out. And they come out, and what was consensual sex for over a decade, they now says was not consensual sex. And he raped me and beat me and, not, who knows whether he did or not. And it doesn't matter. The Democrats used their honeypot to get rid of Eric Swalwell because he didn't want to play ball. And you can't go against the Democratic Party. You saw that with Joe Biden. He said, no, actually, I think I am going to run for another term. And then he appointed Kamala Harris. So he really fucked over the Democratic Party. And Swalwell did the same thing. He was leading for the Democrats. He thought, I'm not stepping down, I'm winning. And he had that little chat. And if anybody ever says to you, I'm going to ask nicely, whenever someone says, I'm going to ask you nicely, that means what's happening later won't be nice. So next article up here, story number 31, billionaire evicts Swalwell and demands $1 million donation return amid drugging and choking allegations from an additional woman. The situation involving Swalwell and billionaire Stephen Klubeck has also grown far more serious. Klubeck, the founder of Diamond Resorts and a longtime financial benefactor to Swalwell, recently confronted the politician at his California mansion. Klubeck, who had initially hosted Swalwell out of the concern for his mental health during the onslaught of the scandal, later declared that the representative busted the trust, prompting the billionaire to demand that he leave the property immediately. The financial component of the dispute involves Klubeck's desire to claw back approximately $1 million in campaign support and donations. The billionaire expressed profound disappointment and disgust, noting that he cannot support Swalwell in the light of the heinous nature of the crimes. He even declared that he now wishes to be identified as a libertarian rather than a Democrat. Fucking tell everyone I'm a libertarian. Fuck you, Democrat Party. I'm a libertarian now. Good. Glad to have you on board. Yeah, so apparently Swalwell was living in this guy's guest house, and the guy said, you're out. When reporters started showing up at his house, there were a few articles out there that said, where is Waldo? Where is Swalwell, apparently he went into hiding at this guy's mansion, and now he was asked to leave. Story number 32, deregulation, cheaper mortgages, and manufactured homes, how Trump plans to solve the housing crisis. The housing crisis and its root causes. The White House report addressed one of the root causes of the crisis, estimating that the national shortage of millions of single-family homes is primarily due to the slow construction after the 2008 financial crisis. It also noted how prior policies raised house prices and mortgage rate and blamed excessive regulations for inflating building costs and inflation and the influx of illegal immigrants. They have to live somewhere. And the illegal immigrants buy houses also. They work and buy houses. Other issues have contributed as well. Many communities have zoning laws that limit or prohibit higher density housing like apartments, duplexes, or townhomes, especially in desirable areas. Local opposition often blocks new development, artificially constraining supply, and where demand is strong and contributing to higher prices. And also, prefab homes. It's a great way to do it. I don't know why prefab homes aren't more of a thing. They should be. One of the homes I own was a prefab. It's not the greatest construction, but cheap to build. Next article up, New York Post, Erica Kirk pulls out of huge Turning Point USA event with J.D. Vance after receiving very serious threats. And then the left-wing media was like, J.D. Vance was booed. It's whatever. I mean, whatever you think about the Turning Point conspiracy theories, Erica Kirk does look sort of like an alien, but I mean, she's the heir apparent, and so be it. Did she have anything to do with her husband's death? It doesn't seem so. You'd have to show me evidence. She's a little weird. She gives me the creeps. I mean, I could understand that. But hey, she's heir apparent, so whatever. I was not a big Turning Point guy, so I like Charlie Kirk to some degree. I mean, I wasn't all into it, but, you know. Oh, so I wanted to get into this next story. 34, The Hollywood Reporter. It wasn't just a job, it was a trap. A former InfoWars staffer tells all, exclusive excerpt in his memoir, The Madness of Believing, out April 15th. Josh Owens, oh man, details what it was like working for conspiracy theorist Alex Jones and how it all started to come crashing down. So I read some of this article from the excerpts. It just was like, it was more like creating something out of nothing. So he describes events and how Alex Jones behaved. And if you ever watch Alex Jones, you're like, yeah, and they took us to a gun range and told everybody, all the staffers, to shoot a gun. And some of the, the women and even me we weren't comfortable with shooting guns, and they made us do it anyway. Ooh. It's just, it's conservative politics. It's constitutional politics. It is what Alex Jones is. There was nothing that I read that was like, oh, wow, that's so crazy. It is what it is. You don't have to. Second Amendment isn't forced upon people. Everybody should know how to use modern firearms to some degree. That way, if you ever come across a loaded firearm, that you don't shoot yourself. Or as like you saw with that principle, if you have to disarm somebody, you're not holding the gun like this. So I'm not going to get through the article. It's a lot of, I read it. I'm like, yeah. And it's not an interesting read. Certainly. There's nothing salacious in there. It's Alex Jones being Alex Jones. And then he was like, they were raided by the FBI or something, or I don't know what. That was like the big part of the book. I don't know. Some tech news, Fox News. Story number 35, Meta reportedly building an AI version of Mark Zuckerberg to interact with company employees. The Facebook and Instagram parent company has been pushing the development of a personal superintelligence. Of course, you're going to have Mark Zuckerberg popping up on the screen and going, hello, I am your leader. Who cares about Mark? Or Facebook and Instagram for any intents and purpose. Zero Hedge, article number 36. After Orban loss, Polish Minister of Parliament of the European Parliament warns EU to set to subjugate everything and everyone as VDL moves quickly to abolish veto power. Now, that's Ursula von der Leyen, who is the head of the European Union, and she's an authoritarian. And she's going to move quickly to abolish member veto power of the European Union. Why? One way Viktor Orban previously served as a constant thorn in the side of other member states was via use of the veto power, namely to block aid to Ukraine and sanctions on Russia. The European Union, what it does is slowly undermine the sovereignty of member states. And if they take away veto power, because you have representatives from your countries, but you need permission from the EU to do anything within your nation state. It's ridiculous. European Union was a plan of the Nazis and is going ahead with undermining a nation state sovereignty. What they want to have is a global empire of zones that are governed by appointee administrators. It's going to be authoritarian dictatorship, with China being the model. The Chinese fascist communist is the model that they're going to employ. But they're not going to be any elections. They're going to be appointed by a corporate board. There's going to be like a corporate hierarchy, and they're going to decide who governs what. National Review, autistic teenager euthanized in the Netherlands. Ugh. 4.5 years after he was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, a Dutch teen was euthanized at his request. The boy, aged between 16 and 18, had described his life as joyless. So he gets murdered. I'm not for euthanasia. I'm not saying that there shouldn't be some end-of-life care, maybe with that option, but only under extreme circumstances. This is like made in Canada. If you just don't want to live anymore, they're like, okay. Especially if you're on government assistance. That's why, and it happens in the United States too. If you're on government assistance and you're in the hospital for something serious, you could just look what happens is they look the other way, and it happened to my mother. And it's happened to other people too, by the way. It's not just my mother, but several instances of whoopsies. Whoops, we dropped your mother. Oh, she almost died. Whoops. Oh, do you want us to save her life? You didn't seem too happy. Especially if you go to the hospital and you go, I'm depressed and I don't really want to live anymore. They're like, oh, we can take care of that for you. Thanks for joining me today. Don't forget to engage the channel, like, subscribe, leave a comment, share the podcast. Yeah, how'd we do? I think we're under an hour. "59 minutes. Remember, you're under attack psychologically and biologically. Stay hip to the trick. Join me every day, Monday through Friday, live streaming at 10 a.m. We're supposed to have a Tuesdays with Perry episode last night. It fell through. Sometimes it's hard for us to connect. We're both busy. But I appreciate you joining me today. And join me tomorrow. I probably won't be here Friday. It's not a long weekend. I have jobs. Okay, good. All right, thanks again for joining me. See you tomorrow. Respect.
These people are crazy. You can't handle the truth.